Okay, so now we're moving on to step 1. We're finally going to start creating things. So I'm moving on to step 01. As always, so as I mentioned in the previous video, we first refer to the starting step, and here we can see what I suggest doing in this step. Namely, quite simply, creating an Angular application. I've got the command line right here, okay? So I'm moving into it. I'm going to create a temp file, a temporary folder. And what I suggest doing is an ng-new, which will let us use the command line, the Angular CLI, to create new Learn Angular. Learn Angular is just a name that works for you. You can put whatever you want. ng new formation Angular. Or, you can put whatever you want, or if it's your project, it'll usually be the name of your project. That's it. First question about the CLI. This is pretty important. It's about which style to use. Either you use CSS, which is the default styling language for the web, or you're offered 3 other options: CSS, Sass, and less. You should know these are called CSS precompilers. They allow us to add features to CSS that in many cases can be quite interesting. They let us have, in particular, cascading styles, and we get quite a few additional features. I tend to always recommend SCSS. We'll see that it has a pretty interesting syntax. We can also use the BEM syntax, which matches quite well with Angular, especially with us. We'll see later interpretations of classes in CSS, and so we get an SCSS output that's actually quite natural to write with this approach. But you can use CSS depending on the situation. That's it. I just tend to recommend SCSS. Next question about SSR. So that's a big topic. So server-side rendering, which is opposed to client-side rendering. What you need to understand about the web is that there are really two very important sides to it. So SSR and client-side rendering. In single-page applications by that we mean Angular, React, Vue generally, and all the other frameworks, they are often client-side rendering. What does that mean? It means that when you access your website to display a web page, these frameworks will download an HTML file containing a JavaScript file, which, once on the user's computer or device, will execute and dynamically build your web page. The web page is not built by the server, which is different, especially with PHP. PHP builds your entire page and then sends you a fully constructed page. That doesn't prevent you from having executable JavaScript on the client side. But what's really important is that with client-side rendering, especially with Angular, the content of your page isn't known when it's downloaded. This is very important, especially if you want to do SEO, that is search engine optimization, which is everything related to ranking on Google and all other browsers. These tools have like robots that crawl different IP addresses and try to read what's inside in order to properly index it in their databases. So if you're using client-side rendering, meaning native Angular, those robots like Google won't be able to index you. In most cases, since we're dealing with applications, usually some kind of management tool that isn't necessarily meant to be indexed by Google or search engines, that will be enough. But you can absolutely create showcase pages, or rather showcase sites or web applications with the goal of SEO. For example, my site techos.org is entirely built with SSR. That allows me, when you search for things like Angular training or similar keywords that I'm trying to optimize for a bit, because after that, we have a whole range of mechanisms to optimize this. So it takes me rank a bit better on Google and elsewhere. That being said, we're digressing a bit, but it's actually something quite important. For us, it doesn't matter for this course, so we say no. Once we've done that, as you can see, the Angular CLI will create a whole bunch of files and install the npm packages. If you don't know what npm is, it's for Node Package Manager. It's a system that comes with Node.js and allows you to manage library dependencies, including Angular. It's something quite large, and as a result, it needs libraries, scripts, and external files to function properly. So right now, it's downloading everything it needs. Well, it's not necessarily long, you know. Well, it depends on your connection, but anyway, whatever the case, this is where we end up. Once that's done, we can check what it has done for us. So it did create the folder I specified just above, right here, formation Angular. So I can go inside it. Okay. I'm going to open it with IntelliJ. And here we'll have a relatively relatively empty Angular project. So here you go, it created this for us. So what's going to be really important is this we're actually going to spend quite a lot of time in the SRC section, especially in the app folder, and that's where we'll be adding a lot of things. There are quite a few little pieces of information in the README. At first glance, it's not necessarily very interesting, although it does tell us a bit about how to run it. Maybe just one more quick side note. So in any NPM project, we have an entry point script that lets us run commands. And here, for example, we can see that we have ng start build. What does that mean? It means that now we have a sort of alias. If we run npm run start, it will execute that command. So here you might think that we've actually lost some speed in execution. But later on, especially for things like watch and so on, we can have much more complex scripts and therefore have aliases that execute multiple commands, which is really interesting. In any case, you can either run npm run start if you're not using IntelliJ, or IntelliJ will suggest it to you once it finishes indexing your folder, your project actually. It will say, oh look, I've detected that you're working with Angular, I suggest you launch it this way. I'm launching it here, but it's the same thing, it's just an ng serve running in the background. You can see it's starting up and it has launched this for us. I click on it to see what it has generated for us. And there you go. We have the basic application that Angular creates for us. What's going to be interesting is to constantly compare what you're creating in your separate project, which is ultimately your training project, your test project where you implement everything I'm showing you in the training project, and to run both of them in parallel. There's going to be a small problem here. It's going to try to launch it. There you go. That's what it's telling me on port 4200. If we take a look here, it launched the Angular application on port 4200 of my computer. So here, since I'm launching it a second time, it tells me, well, look, 4200 is already taken. You can't have two services listening on the same port. It's not a big deal. You just say, yes, I want to use a different one. Afterwards, you can add tags. For example, you can do ng serve port and add your port number, so you can have something more specific and more configurable. Here, I don't necessarily need it. So here, just to show a bit how it works, I'm on step 01 on Angular initialization. The first step suggested that I run an ng new. I did that separately on a project, which I started on port 4200. On port 4200, I have an empty Angular project, a default project, and the Angular training project is offering me the same thing. So I consider that I've reached the goal, I've completed the step, I've finished this. I can go check the final step to see what I'm offering there. In particular, I mention it verbally in a much deeper way and with a lot more arguments than what I put in the file. But anyway, you still get a bit of that here. And once everything is good, I suggest you move on to step 2.